Mr. Estes, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for sharing all of your insights today. I'd like to state from the beginning that I believe infrastructure is very important for us across the country. And by that, I mean the traditional infrastructure definition, highways, roads, bridges, and other similar projects. It's clear that we have to come together with a way and find a way to get these projects done. As an engineer, I believe we need to streamline the approval process for infrastructure projects and attract private dollars to these infrastructure projects by making targeted reforms to our tax code to ensure smarter investments. That being said, this hearing is really about raising taxes on every American in order to pay for the Democrats' socialist policies. It's been a fig leaf that the $6 trillion spending spree that the Biden-Harris administration has proposed. Many of my constituents in Kansas are rightfully worried about the attitude that's common here in Washington, that the government can spend trillions of taxpayer dollars on everything under the sun, like this so-called infrastructure bill, spending without restraint and running up colossal deficits because there aren't any consequences. Well, we're already starting to see the results of the Biden-Harris inflationary policies. April's economic report showed prices jumping 4.2%, the fastest since 2008. Everything from corn to copper to lumber is now more expensive. So when we're looking at infrastructure spending today in relation to the tax code, I think we need to look at how effective things like green tax credits have been and how much are taxpayers on the hook for their costs. They aren't without consequences. Green energy credits, which were originally marked as temporary, have become standard provisions of the tax code. The wind credit was from '92 and the solar credit from 2006. They're turning the standard taxpayer-funded corporate subsidies that overly incentivize wind and solar at the expense of oil, gas, hydroelectric, and nuclear. This means our energy grid is in some places over-reliant on an energy source that is incapable of meeting the demand. Today, we've got a proposal from the Biden-Harris administration to vastly expand another green tax credit, the plug-in electric vehicle tax credit. This credit allows for buying a plug-in electric vehicle to claim a federal tax credit up to $7,500. Between the 2018 and 2022 fiscal year, the Joint Committee on Taxation estimates that foregone revenue associated with the plug-in EV tax credit will total $7.5 billion. Expanding the EV tax credit isn't going to help middle-class Kansans families. The current version overwhelmingly goes to higher income Americans. 78% are claimed by those with incomes over $100,000. It seems as if my friends across the aisle want to tax the rich, only to then give their money back via credits and rebates on goods and services that are Democrat approved. This week, to protect taxpayers from subsidizing high-income earners buying new EVs, I introduced two bills that will close electric vehicle loopholes. The No Subsidies for Government Purchases of Electric Vehicles Act eliminates the ability for a seller of a qualified electric vehicle to claim an unnecessary tax credit when the purchaser is an entity or representative of the federal or a state government. And the Close the Double Subsidy Loophole for Electric Vehicles Act presents somebody from double dipping in federal and state electric vehicle subsidies in states where electrical vehicles are already heavily incentivized. Hardworking Kansas families who are dealing with rising prices on most household goods don't want to subsidize wealthy Americans to buy $185,000 electric luxury SUVs or to pay for the federal government to purchase electric vehicles. If Americans don't want to buy electric vehicles for whatever reason, they don't have to. Democrats in Congress should be focused on reopening the economy and getting Americans back to work, not trying to implement California's failed climate policies. I would like to focus on the current state of the Highway Trust Fund, which actually supports the construction of infrastructure. Mr. Moore, currently about 20% of the Highway Trust Fund dollars are used for mass transit. Are you aware of any other country that uses this model? And does this make sense to take money that was collected specifically for roads to use for other purposes? And should the limited dollars in the trust fund be used for things like bike paths?
Thank you very much for the question. No, nobody else really does a user fee-based highway trust fund the way the United States does. Transportation is generally funded more out of the general fund, even if there are some transportation taxes that flow into that. And yes, because the Highway Trust Fund is predominantly funded by a user fee on road users, there is no justification for pulling those user fees away and using them for other people's benefit in the form of paying for transit. If the federal government wants to support transit projects, that's obviously a legitimate policy decision, but they shouldn't be rating a user fee fund. So they should be using a general revenue sources for that general purpose and leave the user fees in the Highway Trust Fund dedicated to the users that pay them.
Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.